Hey, what is going on guys? RvzStealth here, and in today's video, I'm going to be giving you guys a few tips to hopefully help improve your rating for this upcoming season. These tips are going to be in no specific order, so the first tip I'm going to give you is going to be no better than the last tip I'll be giving you. So with that being said, let's get into the video. My first tip is going to be to try and focus on playing more teamfight oriented champions instead of split pushing champions. I would recommend to stay away from champions like Master Yi or Tryndamere because those champions rely on having a strong early game to be effective. If you fall behind in the early game and you're playing a split pushing champion, then you're going to be really weak because number one, you won't be able to split push because you won't be able to 1v1 anyone, and number two, you won't be able to team fight since you won't have the damage to really do anything. So I would just try to play the more team fight based champions. For example, top lane Malphite's really good. For the mid lane, there's Brandon Lux right now. For AD carry, Misfortune is strong. For the jungle, Amumu is really good. And then for support, there's like Thresh and Braum. Those are just a few strong team fight champions off the top of my head. There's a lot more, that's for sure. But I would just, stay away from those split pushing champions because unless you do have a strong early game on them, you're going to be pretty useless. Whereas if you are playing a strong team fight champion who's got good AoE damage or has good crowd control, even if you do fall behind in the early game as them, since you've got good team fight, it doesn't really matter as much if you fall behind. So I would just recommend doing that if you are looking to climb consistently. My next tip is to take the summoner spell that is appropriate for the situation. So obviously you're going to want to take flash on pretty much every single champion in the game besides someone like a Hecarim or a Udyr. But as for your second summoner spell, it really depends on the situation, more so for mid lane and support than for top lane and AD carry, because for AD carry you're going to want to run flash heal every single game pretty much, and for top lane, unless you are playing a really aggressive top laner, you're going to want to run flash teleport. But as for mid lane and support, it really does depend on the situation as to what summoner spell you want to use, and I see way too many people just running the exact same summoners each game, so I'm just going to go over a few situations as to which summoner you're going to want to run in that situation. So for mid lane, let's say you're playing Lux or Brand or a longer ranged mid lane champion, never take Ignite when you are playing those longer ranged champions because you're never going to get in range to use it very often. You're going to want to stay back and poke when you are playing those champions, and if you do go in Ignite range, then you're probably going to just get blown up right away because Ignite range is pretty short, and if you are playing a longer range champion, there's really no point in taking that. So I would just recommend taking either Heal, Cleanse, or Exhaust when you are playing a longer range mid lane champion. So I've been running Exhaust a lot lately on my Lux, and that's mainly because I've been going up against a lot of assassins, so I would definitely recommend taking Exhaust in the mid lane if you are going up against an enemy assassin, because this is just going to allow you to duel your opponent really well, and it's going to be really strong for the mid to late game team fights as well. Exhaust is, I think it's the strongest summoner spell once you do get to mid to late game team fights, because number one, it slows them, and number two, it reduces their damage by 40%, so that's quite a bit, especially once you do get to those late game team fights. So I would actually definitely recommend taking Exhaust on a lot of mid lane champions because it's one of the better summoner spells in the game for sure. And I would recommend taking Heal in a situation when the enemy mid laner is a ranged champion as well. So let's say you're ranged and you're going up against another ranged mid laner, then I would take Heal in that situation instead of Exhaust. Now as for support, the two summoner spells that you would want to take are going to be Exhaust and Ignite. And if the enemy team does not have a lot of assassins, then I would recommend taking Ignite in that situation. If they do have one or two assassins though, I would recommend taking Exhaust because it's just going to allow you to peel for your AD carry nicely. But if they don't have a single assassin on their team, then definitely take Ignite so you can go more aggressive in the early game, and just overall never take the exact same summoner spell when you are playing mid lane or support in every single game because it really does depend on the situation as to which one you want to run. My next tip is to watch pro players play or just watch the LCS. By doing this, you're going to just gain better knowledge of the game. If you go on Twitch, there's always going to be a bunch of pro players streaming, or if not, then there's going to be some high level diamond or master players or even challenger players playing. So just watching high level players will definitely improve your play by quite a bit because you'll learn certain tricks and you'll learn like different things that you wouldn't if you hadn't watched the stream. So I would definitely recommend doing that if you are looking to climb. My next tip is to take advantage of the third-party sites like op.gg or lolnexus to gain knowledge on your opponent. So these sites are really good, especially for if you're playing jungle, in my opinion, because what you can do is you can see how good the enemy players are on certain champions, and you can also see how good your teammates are. So by gaining this knowledge, you can decide which lane you want to camp. For example, if the top laner has got a really bad record on their Darius, or if they've got a really bad KDA, then camping them is definitely going to be what you'd want to do to just get them down and get some free kills on him in the early game. Or say your AD carry's got a really good record on their misfortune or something, then you could look to camp bot lane to get her ahead so she can carry the game. So I would definitely recommend using these sites because it just gives you a lot of knowledge about the different players that are in the game. My next tip is to make a champion pool. I think this is pretty important if you're looking to climb solo queue consistently. When I started playing just a few champions, I was able to climb like 4 divisions. I pretty much just spammed Ahri in every single game I could, and if I couldn't, then I played like 1 or 2 other champions. And by doing this, I was just able to climb really fast, and it was just mainly because I just knew the champion so well, and I knew her power spikes, I knew when I could go in, I knew when I needed to back out, and I think that just playing a few champions for each role is going to increase your chances of winning because you're going to know pretty much everything about that champion to a certain extent, and therefore you're going to have a better chance at winning every game. My next tip is to try and play more early to mid game based champions. If you take a look at some of the champions win rates in the game right now, the champions that do have a stronger early to mid game are the champions that have the higher win rates. So for AD carry, Misfortune is really strong in the early game and she's got the highest win rate for any AD carry in the game. For mid lane and support, Brand has a really high win rate and he's got so much damage in the early to mid game because of his high base damages. So I would just recommend playing a strong early to mid game champion and try to stay away from those champions that only scale well into the late game. I would stay away from someone like a Kassadin because he's got a really weak early to mid game and he only ramps up once you get a few items on him. So playing those early to mid game based champions is going to increase your chances of winning since games tend to last only around 30 minutes this season. I took a look at my match history recently and the longest game I had was like 35 or 40 minutes. So games don't last as long as they used to. So therefore play an early to mid game champion to increase your chances of winning. My next tip is to make sure you're picking champions to round out the team comp or champions to fit the team comp instead of just picking a champion that you want to play. So for example, if your team's got a full squishy comp and you are last pick, don't just pick Master Yi jungle because you want to play Master Yi. If you want to win that game, then picking a champion to round out your team comp is going to increase your chances of winning by quite a bit, because if you've got a full squishy team comp, once you get to the mid to late game, your chances of winning are going to be pretty low and you rely on a snowball in the early game for you to even have a chance of winning that game. So picking a tank champion in that situation is definitely going to increase your chances of winning. Also, don't just blind pick a champion who's got a lot of counters. For example, Katarina is a champion who's got a lot of counters in the mid lane, so I wouldn't recommend first picking her unless you have seen who the enemy mid laner is, because you're probably not going to have a very good time in the mid lane if you do end up blind picking her, and the likelihood of you getting counterpicked is pretty high. So I would just recommend picking champions to round out the team comp, or just picking strong champions overall that fit into a lot of different team comps if you are looking to climb consistently. My next tip is to be the shot caller or relay information with your team. So for example, if you're playing top lane and you see the enemy top laner use their teleport back to lane, then let your team know that the enemy top does not have their teleport. By doing this, the bot lane can just play more aggressive because then they know that they won't be teleported on, and you can end up looking to make a teleport play down bot lane. Then you can say like, enemy top laner doesn't have teleport, so I'm going to look for a teleport play down bot whenever it is open. So just make sure that you are communicating with your team. Another good one is if you see the enemy jungler in a certain location, then just let your team know where he is, because chances are your team's not going to be looking at their minimap most of the time. And if you just constantly keep an eye on your minimap and keep an eye on what's going on and relay that information with your team, then it's going to prevent a lot of deaths, because your team probably doesn't have the best map awareness. And as long as you can keep good map awareness and you can have an idea of what's going on in the game and what's going on in certain lanes, then you can prevent a lot of deaths that your teammates would have got otherwise if you hadn't let them know what was going on. And my final tip is going to be to make sure that you're not raging or flaming at your teammates when they are having a bad game. So I know from personal experience, if I'm having a bad game, then I'm probably already on tilt a little bit. And if my teammates end up raging at me, or if they end up flaming me saying I'm bad, then I'm probably just going to end up playing worse after that. And I might even end up throwing the game, or I might end up just making really bad decisions. So unless you have something constructive to say, or unless you have something that's going to help your teammate out, then just don't say anything at all. I know I'm a little bit of a hypocrite when it comes to this, because sometimes I just end up typing like, why did you die, or don't do that, or why, and even the littlest things like that can put your teammates on tilt and it can make them play worse. So just let them know, like say your teammate dies for first blood, let them know that you can still win the game and it's alright, because it's just going to keep them off tilt and it's just going to allow them to play better. So if you don't have anything good to say to your teammates, just try to not say anything at all. I know it can be hard in certain situations, but I think that a lot of games that could have been won are lost because people end up arguing, and if you don't argue in the first place, or if you don't even type anything, then you can definitely win a lot more games by just keeping a level head and just not having your teammates go on tilt. So that is all for the video, guys. If you did enjoy, then don't forget to drop a like and subscribe if you have not already. So thanks for watching, guys. Have an awesome day, and I will see you in my next video.